although one cannot conclude where the source of this energy is.
So he's measuring some sort of radiation or electromagnetic energy in that crop circle that he thinks has been created with a non-mechanical means.
Yes.
Right?
So he's actually measuring this residual effect, isn't he? Because the crop circle has already been made, he's gone there, and he's there after the event, and he's making these measurements.
And I have heard stories of people who've been in certain crop circles who they feel sick,
yes,
or other effects as well on people's anatomy. All right, now let's go down the hypothesis then that the World Trade Center was destroyed with a weapon, and it had these effects that you've described, and that's something similar to what's been used in the unexplained crop circles, right? We can hypothesize as to where that weapon might be. And in order to possibly shed light on that, I'm going to show you a clip. This is from 1990. This was filmed by researcher Roy Dutton, who's featured in my crop circle film, of a farmer who describes some extremely strange 2.5 feet diameter black tubes which went right the way up out of his view into the sky. Just take a look at this.
Looking across diagonally, looking at the wood behind, it was to the left, about halfway along the wood line that you can probably see on the film. The first one, where I stood in the field nearby, and then when that died away, the second one appeared near the tree, over near the woods in the far distance, and suddenly in front of me was a tube running up about 1,000 feet. Oh, well, I'm not a good judge, but I would say 1,000 feet plus, or coming down out of sight onto the ground. This was not very many yards away from me, but the important point about it that struck me with it was the circular motion of the ashes in the grit on the ground. It didn't appear to be being sucked up the tube. It was just rotating at high speed on the ground, about 2 feet wide, 2 feet 6 perhaps on the ground.
All right, Andrew, so the farmer's actually describing some rotation in these black tubes, and I think it's probably fairly well accepted that most crop circles are made at night. So if those tubes were something to do with crop circle formation, if that was used at night, then possibly no one would see it. So maybe this is an example of early testing of something that has been applied to use crop circles, to create crop circles. Now, so let's go a step further and spell out what we're saying here, and that is that through the 1990s there may have been testing of energy-based technologies which can be focused and cause changes in matter and things on the ground that were being tested that was similar to something that was used on 9/11. And really there's only one place where I think, my view, where that would be, which is on a platform in space in orbit around the Earth.
Yeah, I mean that's where the logical place where it would be out of sight, at least to most people, and it's coming from above. And of course, we were discussing this earlier, that a lot of people have tried to kind of ridicule this idea of having space-borne technology, doing things on the ground. And this is something that, of course, Dr. Wood has been lambasted for, even though she's never actually said that she knows that the weapon is in space. We don't know where it is. We don't even know in the case of the World Trade Center. We don't have, for example, for the World Trade Center, we don't have any witness accounts describing 2.5 foot thick black beams coming down from the sky. To my knowledge, I've never read such accounts, so we don't know if it's any relation to what this farmer witnessed. But
can I just interject there, Andrew? There was 24-foot diameter circular holes in some of the buildings. Yeah, correct.
So maybe it was the case that they needed to do this differently because they knew they were going to do it in daylight, so they had to do it a different way. These effects did not show up. The black beams did not show up. We don't know. That bit is, we were speculating on that. But it is true, as we were saying earlier, that they did. Ronald Reagan announced in the 1980s this SDI program the Strategic Defence Initiative, where he was going to build this space-borne peace shield which would protect the United States against the Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ICBMs, and all of that propaganda that went along with it. And that was a heavily funded defence programme, and as seems to be the case with these programmes, there's a proportion of that money that gets siphoned off into black, unacknowledged special access programs, USAPs as they've sometimes been called. So what did they develop in those programs? Obviously we don't know, we don't have access to that information, you know, we can only speculate.
Right, now then, there's a very well-known UFO commentator who used to work for the government who's actually made comments himself about an energy weapon technology. Just tell us about that.
So I'll get that quote.
So this is Nick Pope, who used to work for the Ministry of Defence, and he used to work at the UFO desk for I think about 3 years in the early 1990s, and he would receive reports and investigate some of them. Now, Nick Pope doesn't work for the MOD anymore, but a lot of people think he's still influenced by them and speaks in lots of conferences on various different subjects. So just give us this quote, Andrew.
This is round about November or December 2002 that Nick Pope said this. He said, "I had to refute the bizarre idea that the formations were caused by the testing of space-based laser or directed energy weapons and dispel suggestions that media coverage of the issue had been stifled by the use of D-notices." And D-notices are these situations where they say that this breaks the Official Secrets Act, so they have to sort of pull the article from the press or whatever it is.
Right, it's interesting how he's worded that. So
yes.
I had to refute the bizarre idea that the formations were caused by testing blah blah blah, because that wording sounds to me like he's been told that he has to say that. I don't know if this is true, but it seems the way that he's
peculiar
worded.
wording, rather than saying I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that that's what it was.
Right.
He doesn't use that wording. He says I had to refute it.
He had to refute what we're setting out today.
Right.
Now then, let's just mention, because there will be people sitting at home who are just saying, what are they talking about? They're all made with planks of wood. And really, you have got to go and watch my film on this. But in that film, what I asked David Cate and Robert Hulse to do was to show me the crop circles that they've got board marks in them, so they've definitely been made by planks of wood, with people stomping the crop, and other ones which they found definitely were not made with planks of wood. This other hidden explanation with some energy effects. And if you put them side by side, we were just looking at these earlier, and I actually asked, in the film I actually say to Robert and David, well, is it the case that the man-made ones with the stomping are more complex? And Robert Hulse scratches his head and says, well, it seems to me that the ones that are made, that we know were created with planks, were more arithmetic, and the other ones had a more organic quality. And I actually think that, we saw the clip with the farmer there, he said that the beam was spinning like this. I think the non-man-made ones are made with some sort of rotational energy, which actually I think explains the formations, whereas the man-made ones have a lot more straight lines and cubes,
yes,
and that kind of look like they've been drawn on an engineer's drawing board, as Robert Hulse explained. So I suspect that the thousands of crop circles that have been made using planks, that I think is sponsored by covert agencies, was done so that people can't tell the difference between the two and really just think that they're all man-made.
They're all just
And a lot of people seem to look at these crop circles and interpret them and come up with all kinds of theories as to certain entities are communicating with them, messages and what have you. Now, I'm not refuting that as an argument, right? I'm not saying that there might not be non-human intelligences which have been responsible for some crop circles. I think that's possible, right? But all I'm doing is looking at this evidence, right, which shows a parallel with some 9/11 evidence, and perhaps points to a more man-made phenomenon, even though it's not been made with planks of wood.
Yeah, well, I think, if we go on to that in relation to the themes of some of the crop formations, and we spoke about this earlier, and something I noticed in around about 2010, 2011 sort of time, around about then, that there was a lot of crop formations they were put into the Daily Mail, in pictures of them, and all to do with the Mayan calendar. So this seemed peculiar as to why this would be encoded in crop circles. Why was our attention being focused on the end of the Mayan calendar? And some people were claiming it was going to be the end of the world, or there was going to be this mass spiritual awakening and so forth, which to me doesn't really seem to have happened, at least not the way I see things. People might argue with me.
Did you not spiritually wake up in 2012, Andrew?
Well, not really. No, I'm afraid not. I mean, maybe I missed out, but I don't think there was some key event that happened to me then. Some people would argue that it was kind of the cusp of a turning point. Like a point of inflection, perhaps, in the way that things are going. I don't know, but I don't want to debunk the idea totally. But what was curious is that we had a lot of these crop circles with Mayan symbolism put into them and getting us to focus on that. And that one, therefore, if we take what we've proposed tonight, that there is this energy technology which has been used to create some of these formations, we don't know how many, then would that be being used as a way of injecting certain types of information into the New Age movement? And the symbolism in crop circles has been quite powerful in the sphere of people that are interested in it.
Yeah, what I found is that people are so bowled over by these incredible patterns, and they've clearly got meaning in them, such as to do with eclipses or to do with the Mayan calendar, as you mentioned, and Nazca lines and all kinds of other themes, right? And they will immediately start interpreting them rather than say, well, what's really behind it and who's made it. So they're not bothered about what happened as to how it was created. They're just interpreting it, which to me, you really need to know who was behind it before you start interpreting it.
Yes.
And as you say, it's a different medium of communication, isn't it?
It is. Yes. Yeah.
Because on the surface, it would seem to some that it's not been through our media, because anyone can actually stand on top of a hill or get a photograph from Nancy Talbot or whoever and see it in its pure form. So it's not being messed with by media or what have you. And that would be a way of, let's say, a non-human intelligence passing a message onto everyone rather than a government.
Yes.
So you can see why people get enthralled by the whole phenomenon.
Yes.
But the question I ask is it being used to implant certain ideas within certain, new religions, if you like?
Yes, and I mean, one of the circles or formations that intrigued me, which we talked about earlier, was the alien head. And this was the crop formation where it showed what appeared to be a grey alien holding a compact disc. And this to me was certainly, whether this was made by planks or whether it was made by this energy technology or whether it was made by, an external group of beings, I really don't know myself. I think David Caton has perhaps got more information on this particular one, but whichever method was used to create this formation, what is intriguing to me is the intricacy. For example, it includes an English message which is encoded into the ASCII code, that's the American Standard Codes for Information Interchange, which is essentially a code of binary. So they had to, in other words, had to write out this message, which was, if my memory serves me correctly, we beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, believe there is good out there, and we oppose deception. I might have got some of this in the wrong order, and then a comma at the end. Who decided, for example, that it would be binary encoded in ASCII form? Who decided that then that would go into the spiral formation inside a CD? Who conceived this? Where did that idea come from? And why was it put in a crop formation? Those are questions which I don't have answers to, but I think those are questions that one should ask as to what the motivation was, and why was it in English? Why wasn't it? And in that sense, it was an unusual formation because most of the others don't have a literal English message in them. They're more symbolic, pictorial, pictograms, and this sort of thing. So that really, really did intrigue me as to what was behind that particular formation.
I think that formation, I've had a lot of people sending me emails, well, wow, what do you think of this? This could be a message from an alien race and things like that. So people were sold on that idea more on that crop circle than they were on the other just symbol crop circles.
Yes.
So it possibly took people down an avenue better than just the symbolic ones, because it actually had a message and a picture of an alien, right? Which I'm not saying it's disinformation or cover. Well, I think the vast majority of crop circles are a cover for the tiny few that have this unexplained aspect. I don't know what the unexplained aspect is.
Yes, and I mean we also know that the military are interested in it. Some of that is in your film as well, but and we talked earlier about Colin Andrews and Operation Blackbird, where he had uniformed military officers on the field, and I know that you'd also spoken about that. But we know that the military is interested in this phenomenon, which proves to me that it's not just people stomping and making these weird graphic designs. There's something else to it.
Yeah, and well, with all disinformation, which is what the crop circle phenomenon is, in my opinion, it's done to either confuse, muddle up, or hide something, which is where we've seen it with 9/11, we've seen it with the UFO phenomenon, we've even seen it in the Madeleine McCann case, in my opinion. All right, well, let's mention, because you mentioned Colin Andrews, somebody who was working with Colin Andrews, I think 2009, Paul Weige, who was an expert on crop circle research and other things such as computer encryption techniques. He had an engineering type background, and he would take all kinds of measuring devices into different crop circles. And one of the things he was working on before he died, he was only 43 by the way, was he had alleged to have detected audio frequencies. So this isn't EM radiation or what you think is at play in, say, the World Trade Center. This is audio frequencies. But and during that research, or at some point, because I think he'd arranged to meet with Colin Andrews in the crop circle season that was about to in probably 2009 and 2010, but he just walks into the sea, and then his body is discovered. An open inquest, so they don't know that he committed suicide, and they don't know he was murdered. And I think it's possible that Paul Weige was getting close to something.
Yes, and I mean, we discussed this as well, and I did meet Paul Weige in 2006 at a conference, and he was a very nice young man, basically, and obviously very intelligent, you said, very knowledgeable, very skilled in what he was doing. And he also was interested in a lot of the other topics that you and I are interested in, and for example, he had 9/11 type postings on his website, as well as the crop circle stuff and some of the other topics. So did that have anything to do with the facts that he was?
I think the other problem in work, if let's say he was murdered, the other problem in working out why he was murdered is he was very much into data encryption, and what he, as far as I'm aware, he'd been communicating with people in the House of Lords, and he'd been educating some of the Lords on data encryption and saying how it is so important for people's freedom to be able to encrypt their data reliably and not have back doors into their data. And because obviously it's not the sort of thing that your average Lord is going to know about.
Yes.
So when they're passing laws on data encryption and whether governments should be able to spy on your data, MPs generally don't know how to vote because they're not experts on the subject. But he was educating people in the House of Lords, as what I've heard, on data encryption. So that could be another reason.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't know
so, but there's all sorts of weird circumstances about his death.
Yes.
That he's supposed to have posted his passwords or something through the letterbox.
Mm.
But there's no evidence that he posted those passwords, because I think one of the passwords didn't work. So I think it looked as though someone was trying to plant evidence to suggest there was a suicide.
Yes. Yes.
But it could have been not him that's done it. So, hey, if anyone wants to investigate and make a film and expose a story, get your teeth into that one. The mysterious death of Paul Weigel.